Okay, everybody, I'm gonna get started because we're running late on the technical stuff the first time that I do a presentation. Anyway, so this being the season of Advent and the honoring of Mary, the decorations in blue, and Amy asked me if I would do a cycle on Mary's life. And Mary's life that we know of comes from a lot of sources. Here they are, and this isn't all of them. Of course, the Bible, and then the Gnostic Gospels, there's Pseudo Matthew, there are endless other ones, but his is an infancy. The 3rd century Gospel of the Nativity of Mary, and the one I'm using today or starting with it. Before I get into the biblical Mary, is the proto-evangelium of James, another infancy gospel. Then there's the Meditations of Christ, and there is later in my talks the Gospel of Nicodemus, and then of course the many things that have been that have become part of Catholic dogma that are strictly different. And then the great 13th century golden legend. Okay, so I'm starting with the Arena Chapel. And those of you who know me know that this is like one of my passions in life, is this small church. It would fit in this wall, right? And it's tiny. The images I'm going to show you are about this wide. A little bit, maybe this, some of them are this wide, some of them are this wide, depending on if it's the side with the windows. And there's nothing else like this in the whole history of art, which is the cycle of the parents, Anna and Joachim of Anna, and then, of Mary, and then also the other side, the really early life of Mary from her birth to her marriage. And I think you will find this amazing. So Chateau de Bondone is our artist, and he is considered proto-Renaissance because he's so much more advanced than coming out of the Gothic period. The Gothic period, of course, was still, a lot of it was just frozen in the Byzantine tradition, and his figures start to have mass. They start to be able to move. The hands are delicate. They're in all kinds of positions, not just a frozen frontal. And he's a complete genius. The chapel was built as part of a compound by Enrico Scrivini. It's called the Arena Chapel because it was built on an all Roman arena site, and Scrivini is his name. His father was a center of usury. His name was Rinaldo. And Enrico had this palace built and the chapel beside it, the chapel as a dedication for the forgiveness of sins for usury. And this was like adultery and murder in the medieval period. It was a big deal. So here is our chapel, and we're going to see how it changed. And as you can see, the palace was destroyed in the 19th century, and the chapel was restored after the city decided in the 90s they were going to turn it into condominiums, take the goes down, and everybody went berserk, thank goodness, and it was restored and reopened. And I believe you still have to go in the chamber to get dehumidified before you go in. And you'll have been, and anything you want to add to this, please speak up, because I haven't been. And
that was the thing that surprised me. The first time I went 20 years ago, and you just walked in, but the second time they worked so hard to take what they had them acclimate to 15 minutes before they let you in the door because you're sweaty or something. And then went in.
Really. And so we were very happy to acclimate.
Well, we're grateful they're doing that. Really, it's like the caves. They can do that. Restored case. Okay, so the front portico comes off. And this is our chapel, what it looks like today, and we are looking at the apse, the east side. The south side is the cycle of, that we'll see first, this is Joachim and Anna, the top tier. And the north side is the early life of Mary. The middle row is the life of Christ, it meaning his ministry, and the bottom is the passion, and these are virtues and vices. Every square inch of this chapel is fresco. You all know fresco, I don't need to explain it, how it's done. Small sections of plaster added, wet, it's called buon, B-U-O-N. Fresco means fresh, and then after this skim is put on with a trowel of plaster, you take a drawing that has holes punched in it and you dust it with red sepia. So the outline comes out on the wet plaster, and you only plaster an area big enough to be done in one sitting. Now that might be 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours. And he finished this in 625 days with 40 assistants. And Giotto was present for most of it. So, and did most of it, particularly what I'm going to show you today. Okay, let's get going. This is a detail of the apse, and the reason I'm showing you this is here is his Annunciation, the angel Gabriel and the Virgin Mary. This is the back wall, which is the Last Judgment. You can see that our sides switched. And the reason I'm showing you this is because right here is Enrico Scriveni offering the chapel to God. And the chapel was started about 1300. The frescoes are 1304 to 06. And in 1303, the Pope issued indulgences for anyone who wanted forgiveness for sins to go to this chapel. So it has a significance, huge significance in the Catholic Church at that period. And I want to point out while we're here, and then I want you to carefully watch. Look at the volume in the figures and how the drapery follows the movement of the body. And with light and dark also, and pretty realistic folds. Now, this is pre-Renaissance early Renaissance started 1400, 1425, but this is really 100 years before. And look at the faces, the profiles, the beautiful shading, and there was skull leaf done. Now, where you see it looking really smooth and beautiful, it's would be one fresco where the color is in the wall, it's in the plaster. The expensive colors like blue tended to react with the line in the plaster, and so they flaked off over the years, so they never look pretty. They've been repaired 100 times. They were put on dry because they could go into wet plaster. So that's why your blues aren't really beautiful, even though terribly expensive. This is the ceiling. The Virgin is up there. Also the eight planets, according to what you read, and different prophets. And of course, the stars of heaven, and the ceiling was dedicated to God. So we're starting here on the south side with the story of Joachim. And he was one of the 12 tribes of Israel. The story of their marriage was one of being barren, and barrenness was considered a sin, or you were imperfect at this era. He and Anna had lived separately, very devoutly for a long time. And then finally, he went to the temple for one of the typical Jewish worship celebrations, and he was scolded by the priest and ousted. So this is what you're seeing here. Sorry that's up there, but this is his expulsion from the temple. Notice again the robes, the volume and the figures, the beautiful detail, and the sort of doll-like architecture. And just think about that, you couldn't really do scale architecture on a painting this big, you'd have to reduce it and make it more or less symbolic. And he was so scolded, so embarrassed, humiliated, he went and joined the shepherds, and this is his meeting with the shepherds. Scott, is there anything we can do about this band? It's right in my titles. I'm sorry to ask you.
See. I can't promise anything.
It's just,
It would be helpful, wouldn't it?
I wouldn't dare play with my computer. It's like- See how high you can. Oh. So,
Can't I just hit this bar? I can do that, or I can do that. I can do that. So I can do that. I think I'm gonna have to leave.
can you go like further left a little bit?
That's as far as it looks like I can go. I don't know why. What is? Shade left. Loading. Oh, there we go.
So there.
There we go. Got it.
You can read the title. So he goes among the shepherds.
Can you read the title to us?
Yes, that was Joachim among the shepherds. And this one is, we have this interruption where while he's out feeling horrible for being expelled, the angel of the Annunciation to Anna goes to Anna in her home. Now, Anna is from Bethlehem and Joachim was from Nazareth. So this is the angel, obviously, and Anna. And this figure is, this is a spool, like from yarn, from knitting or weaving. And that was an attribute to her. That was probably her, I want to say, profession or her passion. And it was also a very big deal in Italy. Of course, fabric was everywhere. So Joachim, while this is happening, goes and sacrifices a goat. You can see the skeleton of the goat on the top of the fire pit, and Joachim with this figure, this blessing, I mean, really only Christ does that. It's a little confusing, and I've never been able to find out who it really is meant to be. So then Joachim has a dream, and of course, in the dream, he's told that Anna is pregnant with child. And meanwhile, Anna is told to go to Jerusalem to meet him, where he is, he's still there, being expelled from the temple. And this is the most famous of all. I know everybody's seen it. They're meeting at the Golden Gate, and this is it takes place in Jerusalem, and it's one of the most tender scenes in all of art. And they're embracing, and you can imagine how happy they were. The hooded black figure is unexplained, probably meant to be just some overhanging death. And it is said in legend that after Mary was born, Joachim died, and Anna remarried, and her grandsons are some of the apostles. So it's an interesting, legend is fascinating. So in this detail, look at this embrace. I mean, just the skill of coming out of the Byzantine era, and the light on her face and her hands and their hair and this ropey braid. I mean, it's just incredible. So I want you from now on to focus on Anna, because we're really leading the story of her parents, and look at her, look at how she develops, how her colors change, and the development of her physique, I guess you'd say, her physiology. So this is the birth of Anna and also the baby. This is the first episode in your opposite north wall. Your north wall is a little larger because it doesn't have windows. The presentation of the temple, this happens when she's 3 years old. And from this point on, legend says that she's of course dedicated to God. This is one of the promises that Anna and Joachim made. And she stays in the temple or in the home of Anna, and Anna keeps it completely pristine and pure and clean, because she is a child of God and dedicated to being this mother of God. So there's a lot of protection around her, according to legend. This is all from the Proto-Evangelium, not the Bible. And so the story goes that when you're 14 years old, you are told to leave the temple and to go marry, find a suitor. And so the suitor for Mary needed to be from the house of David. And these men line up with their branches. The myth was that if the branch, they're all combined, as you'll see later, and they're all combined, and one is supposed to sprout. And the one that sprouts, that man gets to marry Mary. Well, if you'll notice carefully, who's in the background? He's hiding because he thinks he's too old, although he's been called because he's from the house of David. And here are the branches lined up. Joseph's still in the background, and nothing lights. So at this point, timing gets kind of odd, but because the next thing I'm going to show you is the marriage. And what happens between the lighting of the branches, and you can see here that Joseph's is lit, and there's also a dove on it, a flower and a dove, is in between there is the Annunciation. And according to legend, Joseph is betrothed to Mary, but he doesn't see Mary until she's 3 months pregnant. And at that point, he becomes afraid. And that's when the angel comes to him and says, don't worry, this is God's work, and you have no reason to not marry her. And he does, but doesn't take her as a physical, intimate wife until after Christ is born. And the Catholic Church believes that he never did, that she remains pure. So, but this is in the story we're looking at here. This is, and you can see her tummy, the marriage with a little bit of pregnancy here. And there's some mad men, the one's getting ready to strike Joseph, and the other breaks a branch over his knee of the other suitors. And then, of course, Mary's team of virgins that protect her, sort of like ladies in waiting. And this is the procession of the marriage, where they go back to her honeymoon. Apparently, the Annunciation takes place in Nazareth. Okay, we're going to start with the Bible. That was all the Proto-Evangelium of James. So the Annunciation, I've printed it out for you, and I've given you a list of all that I could find in the Bible where Mary's actually present. I didn't do images if she was not present, only the scenes where she participates. And there are, of course, other mentions of her, but she's not present in them. So the Annunciation, we all know the wording of it, and it apparently happened around March the 25th, hence our 9 months later, the birth of Christ at Christmas. And that's how we come up with the date, I believe. One of the earliest that I could find, and that's known of the Annunciation, is in the Catacomb of Priscilla. And Priscilla was a noble woman in Rome. She was of a senatorial family. She converted to Christianity, and she was martyred. And her catacomb is one of the largest, and there were just beautiful images there. And this would be fresco. And we're not sure, history's not sure who this is addressing her, but some say Isaiah and some say just a prophet, we don't know, but it's not Gabriel. And she's holding the baby, Jesus, it's hard to see, and she has on no mantle, no veil, which is typical Roman tradition at the time. Women didn't wear veils. This is probably one of the most familiar to you, Simone Martinez's Annunciation. And it is incredibly breathtaking. It was done for the cathedral in Siena, and it's been moved, of course, to the museum. But I want you to think about Mary, and we've had an enormous jump to a very elegant Mary in elegant robes that have brocade. She's on a throne. She's been interrupted from reading by Gabriel, who lights immediately in front of her. And if you notice Gabriel, this is like instant. His garment is still moving in the wind. So this is a sudden approach, and she is shrinking back. It says in Luke's description that she is afraid. So you can read this as fear, as just surprise. The two saints with her, the one on the left, I can never remember his name. He's the patron saint of the Siena Cathedral. And this is Margaret, who is the patron saint of women who are pregnant or in childbirth. There are lots of symbolism here. The lily, of course, the white lily is a symbol of Mary. And Gabriel comes with an olive branch and also an olive garland on his head, and in an effort of that, of course, is a sign of peace or goodwill. And another couple of things to point out is these are prophets, and this originally was God. I don't know, nobody knows what happened. And this is the Holy Spirit hovering over her. So you can think of the Holy Spirit in different ways. It can be sometimes it's a cloud, sometimes it's the wind. It's been described different ways. But I want you to look at her face. I mean, she's just so exquisitely gorgeous. And not only that, but she's exquisite. And we know that Mary Kane was a lowly girl in a small provincial town occupied under Roman occupation. And she's already in the early, this is late 13th century. She's already been magnified as sort of a queen or an elegant woman. And this is Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you in Latin. And that was, his introduction to her. So think about her emotional state. Her obvious answer was yes. And that's powerful. We believe that she knew she was intended to be the mother of God, and she was accepting of that. But I think Gabriel frightened her, surprised her. I love this one. It's one of my favorites. The classic that everybody knows is Fra Angelico's. He was a monk, and this was done for his convent in San Marco. It was at the top of the stairs where the monks all go up to the refectory, and it's just a different take on the Annunciation. Mary's not reading. She's crossing her hands. She's listening carefully to Gabriel. She's not frightened. This is so calm and peaceful and quiet and meditative, and was done in its location for that purpose. That was fresco, by the way. I'm jumping to the 19th century, late 19th, and this is he goes by James Tissot now, French artist. He was actually, some of his work is impressionistic. He's certainly of this period. And this is a Middle Eastern setting, and at this time in art, the French especially were fascinated with Orientalism, particularly if you think about the works of James McNeill Whistler. And this whole take on a little bit of this turbanish wrap, Muslim garb, I'm going to say. Of course, she didn't fun. But the whole scene here with the tapestry, the rugs, the bedroll, it's very, very Middle Eastern and Turkish. And of course, Gabriel is an apparition. So how do we know? Gabriel's described most places as androgynous, even though it's a male name. So you all can ask me questions if you have anything. And I'm going just a flashback to the apse at the Arena Chapel. Visitation. The next thing that happens in Luke is Mary's visit to Elizabeth. Elizabeth's in her 6th month. Mary's close to her 3rd, I was saying. And Elizabeth was in a similar situation to Anna. Elizabeth and Zechariah were older, barren, and a child came to her by grace and the power of God, the prayer. When she describes being 40 to 50 years older than Mary. So this is where we come into the Magnificat, the great song of Mary's. He responds with, "My soul glorifies the Lord, my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior." And she apparently stayed there for 3 months, according to the Bible. One of the earliest, and this is a total breakout from Gothic sculpture. If you think about the early Gothic sculpture like Notre Dame, Paris, the figures are attached, they're frozen, they're stiff, they can't possibly move out of their space and off their column attached in the back. And these are later, this is considered classicism in Gothic art, where this is a pickup on Greek and Roman contrapposto. Remember, we've talked about that before in my classes, the weight shift, the shift on one leg, the slight swing of the hips, the dip of one shoulder. That is what you're seeing here. It looks a little rough, but it's, I think it's meant to be looser. And you see the more enlarged abdominal area of Elizabeth and the age, and also the tighter but a little bulge of Mary. And this graceful turn into each other is also significant because, they were cousins. So, and probably had shared great joy in being with each other. Visitation is not just a visit, it's a visit with a purpose. And so this is a huge event in their lives. And let's see, here's this has a great story. How many of you have read The Personal Librarian? This was one of J.P. Morgan's artworks that was donated to the Met. Not sure if Bell selected it. I could never find that out. But it's 24 inches tall, and they look almost identical. The one on the left is Mary, who reaches up and touches Elizabeth's shoulder. And this is Elizabeth who touches her heart with that expression, and I won't quote it perfectly, how blessed I am that the mother of the Lord has visited me, something like that. Anyway, but this is from Constance's in Germany, and German art at this period, they were so skilled at wood, at carving. And this, of course, is painted and gilded, but part of that German Gothic, late Gothic tradition. This would be timing-wise, 5 years after Giotto's Arena Chapel. But just an exquisite piece, and the gesture through the hands, the touch, and, very, very gentle here. What is amazing is that these pieces had cavities in their abdomens that were covered with crystal. And at the time, you could look through it and see the fetuses. And this was acceptable and expected in the medieval period. So that's one of the really unusual and significant pieces, details of this piece. And here's Rembrandt. Of course, Rembrandt, we always think of this masterful light that envelops everything, that is just the core of what he paints. So we have here the aged Elizabeth greeting Mary. And this is Zachariah, who's old and came with help from a young boy. And barely, we always kind of say that Joseph appears most of the time in the background or is fairly insignificant. And here he is pulling up the ass, or there's Joseph, the ass or the goat, the whatever mule they had up the steps to agree. He's the last person to come in. The mention of Mary's marriage is by Matthew. He doesn't really describe it, but he does say that when Joseph woke up from the dream that we've talked about, that the angel of the Lord had commanded him, and he took Mary home as his wife. And then, but he had no union with her. So Luke and Matthew flip back and forth on timing a little bit, so it's hard to really nail it down. So the nativity, I might mention that of the three major scenes of early biblical art with Mary are the timing, the Annunciation, the Nativity, and the visit of the Magi. And the Nativity was the most painted, the Magi second, and the Annunciation third. And let me tell you, there are 10,000 paintings at least of these. If you go online, you can't even decide what to choose. It's an amazing grouping. So we know the story of the Nativity. I've just put it up for transition, really. But two things to remember: the manger, and that this happened on their trip to get registered in the census in Bethlehem. So they're now in Bethlehem. So one of the first images of the Nativity is from this sarcophagus in Milan. And before 431, Mary was not included, because it took the Council of Ephesus to decide that she was the mother of God, God bearer, they called it, before she was included in the nativity scenes. So I think that's kind of an interesting, it was a huge turnaround for the Catholic Church and for art. And of course, the animals come from Isaiah, with the animals being able to all reside in peace with each other and with people. And that's some of the significance of why they're included. This is, I'm trying to show you some really different types of art. The Della Robbias, yes.
So what is the debate? Why was it?
What was
happened at
what?
the council? What happened at the council of?
That was the debate over whether Mary was mother of God.
Okay, so they wouldn't put her in because they were still.
In the nativity scene. She was in other things of the church, but then we decided that she actually, I want to say birth, but that really isn't right. The child, right? Jesus. He's not Christ yet, I guess. So this family had these terracotta plaques. They were everywhere in Florence, Rome, all over Italy, and they're just exquisite. I mean, imagine doing this in terracotta, and the faces are so human and so realistic. And I just wanted to show it to you because I think it's beautiful. And again, we see Mary in elaborate robes. She started, and I'm not sure what year the blue started, the blue mantle, but it was not initially. Another nativity scene just a different take on the piece of this, just the aging Joseph, the perfect Mary, and the baby who actually looks a little more like a baby and can actually turn himself into a different position besides being flat on his back or being held. Have you ever seen Gauguin's? He did 3 nativity scenes. They're a little confusing, a little mixed up as was he. Anyway, he was a stockbroker, banker slash, who left his wife and went off to Tahiti to live with the natives. And anyway, so obviously you see the angel who's come to this woman with a child. So this would be Mary with child. And then here is another nativity with the animals, the ox, the sheep, the ass, and here is a woman on a bed holding a baby. But it's just, this mission of the feelings of Christianity coming out in all artists. Van Gogh, I don't know too many artists in the world who haven't painted some part of the history of Christ in the Bible. And I love this one from the Crow Nation, where just the parents are in awe, and Mary is wrapped in the traditional weaving blanket. I think that's just beautiful. This is fairly new, so it continues to be a subject. The Visit of the Shepherds. So we're not really sure where in the timing of this, whether it was certainly soon after the birth, but we don't know if it was a month or 9 months. We do know that it was before 2 years, because that's when they left Bethlehem. Late 2nd century, I guess. So one of the most famous is the Portinari altarpiece by Hugo van der Goes. This is Flemish, and typical Flemish at the time. This is Northern Renaissance, and Northern Renaissance didn't have the bulk in their figures that the Southern Renaissance did. And they also took great liberties with perspective and proportion, as you can see. So this was a huge piece through a triptych. Here's Portinari with his 2 sons. This is St. Thomas and St. Anthony. And here is his wife, Margarita, with Mary Magdalene and Saint, that's not Margaret. I think it is Margaret. Anyway, little angels, these have little crowns on, and Mary, this tiny, almost plastic looking Christ on his back, unclothed, unswaddled. And here are these realistic shepherds, and they are our subject. And everything else is more or less, I don't want to say symbolic, but it's telling a story, but it's not realistic context. But they've just come off the field and they look like it, and they look like working men. Here's a detail of the center panel. And here is Carolyn Dios. This is late, early Renaissance, right about the time Da Vinci's starting to paint. So you're really seeing a lot of development here. This is Bethlehem, believe it or not, and the obvious parade coming in to visit the Christ child, which we don't really see in the Bible. But here they are again, beautifully and realistically presented.
So Mary's a blonde in that one?
That's I needed to bring that out and look at her clothes. First of all, no one knows what anyone in the Bible looked like. We do know that they're Middle Eastern, and we do assume that there would be some darkness to the skin tone, some olive complexion there. But every artist paints them so far the way that they see their neighbor, their model, their wife. So Mary has a lot of different hairstyles and different robes and different elaborate crowns and halos and brocades. And yes, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, here we are this is from the Belgium. He would be a contemporary of Rembrandt. I think this is one of the most gorgeous ever. Just you have that lighting of Rembrandt, that Baroque sense of drama from light. And you see the shepherds on the left. Mary has traditionally acceptable coloring for her is a red undergarment and a blue mantle, and that's what she's wearing here. The next thing in Luke is the presentation of Jesus at the temple, and this is on the 8th day, the circumcision. And this is when he the scene with Simeon and Anna, the old priestess. The first one is Giovanni Bellini, and this is Renaissance, kind of late early Renaissance, and I think this is just beautiful. Just the expressions here. This would be Simeon, and this would be Joseph, and not sure who the women are or these men. That would not be Mary Magdalene. She hasn't come on a picture yet. But even though she's in a red veil, but I love just the expressions and the wrapping. And here is Simon Bouillet. He's a French painter. This is in the Baroque period. It has that Baroque gesture, a lot of twisting, turning, drama, and the presentation of this baby at the temple. And this would be the 84-year-old who lived at the temple. Apparently she never left. And I love this, the presentation at the temple with Mary, Joseph, Simeon, and Anna. This is 20th century icon. And you know, the icons, you all know this, what they are. They are the actual presence of who you're looking at and observing. And the icon has the power of that person in prayer. So Matthew, the visit of the Magi, and this is our Epiphany. We celebrate this a week, more or less, after the birth of Christ. Although the Magi could not have gotten there that fast, I have to say. So it's confusing, the timing again on when they actually appeared. It would have been before they left the flight into Egypt, but it's debatable how close to the birth, but it is just a beautiful, beautiful story. So early on, the sarcophagus, these early Christians, these Romans who converted early to Christianity, had their sarcophaguses carved with biblical scenes. And this is an early one of the gifts of the Magi. And the reason there are 3, and we know their names, is because there were 3 gifts mentioned in the Bible. It could have been an entourage of Magi, but we do know the names of 3, and I'll get to that in a minute. This is, again, a Baroque piece from Belgium artists. And if you look at these, we know that Caspar was a king of Tarsus, and he comes with gold. Balthazar is black, I'm going to call him African, probably from either Yemen or Ethiopia. And Melchior is bringing the myrrh. Very interesting grouping. And of course, they were told to not return the same way they came, because Herod wanted to track them to find out where the Christ child was. So this is pre the massacre of the infants, but we're not sure when. God might know. And I have to show you this Rubens. Rubens did this whole series of portraits of Maria de Medici, a whole cycle of her, and that's exactly how he's painting Mary. In a red dress with a low bodice, kind of plump in typical Rubens fashion. But you still see here the same three magi, the baby being offered. First of all, usually to the older Caspar first. And I love this. This is a contemporary artist. He's white. When I first saw this, I thought it has to be a black artist. And no, he's white, and it's just how he paints. He's from London. He lives in London. But I love this. I just think it's magical. And the Christ child has already received one of the gifts. The ox and the ass are there, and there are the three kings, and Joseph looking over her shoulder. So all of these stories, remember, continue to be in art. They continue to inspire. The flight into Egypt comes next. This is, of course, the Magi don't return to Herod, and an angel comes to Joseph in a dream and says, "You've got to leave. You've got to go to Egypt." And Egypt was under Roman rule, but it was not under the rule of Herod. So they were supposed to be safe there. Not sure how long they stayed there. But supposedly they were told by an angel later that Herod died in 4 BC. And then, what was his name? Archelaus, I've got it somewhere, was Herod's son, was in charge in Jerusalem or in Israel, and they decided then, or in Jerusalem, they decided then to go back to Nazareth. And this is one of the early stained glass windows. This is from Notre Dame, Paris. We haven't looked at stained glass yet, but you can see the donkey and their sort of movement. Just beautiful. All of these Gothic windows that were so blue. This goes back to the Arena Chapel. This is Giotto's flight into Egypt. And you can see Joseph and the servant and people following them. And these angels, again, the blue, the azurite, the lapis lazuli, whatever they used for the blue in this particular one, it flakes and you kind of can't keep it perfect. And this is almost the identical posturing of Jesus's entry into Jerusalem in the Passion scene, if you know that piece. And this is Henry Osawa Tanner, was an African-American artist who felt so out of touch and under such prejudice in America that he moved to Paris, and he is a significant late impressionist. This travel was described as being at night, and a lot of the artists don't paint it at night. But I think you get the feeling here of the loneliness and I'm sure fear and this creeping into a brand new territory. And then, of course, an angel comes again and a dream to Joseph and says, "Get up and take the child and his mother and go back to the land of Israel because Herod is dead." And he says, "No, Archelaus is reigning, and I'm not going there. I'm going to go to Nazareth," which seems to be more the base home. And very many artworks actually on the return to Nazareth. But this one you can see has taken on the clothing, the attire, the gesture. Mary is no longer in blue mantle, in a white dress, which does have on red, and Joseph is older and older, and Jesus has grown 4 or 5 years old, which is probably accurate as they return. And in a lot of these scenes, I failed to mention in the Rembrandt greeting of Elizabeth and Mary, there was a dog, and of course, the dog appears in a lot of scenes. It was in the shepherds, in Joachim with the shepherds, and of course, it's a symbolic of faithfulness. And Jesus next, according to Luke, disappears in the temple, hides in the temple, remains in the temple. After Mary and Joseph have been to Passover in Jerusalem, they're returning, they realize he's not with them, they go back and look. And you know the story. This is the last time that Joseph is mentioned in the Bible. This disappearance. And this is without Mary. But I wanted to show you this because it's such a classic of Jesus as sort of a 12-year-old in the temple surrounded by these priestly scholars. And this is a German painter, Henry Kaufmann. Whoops. And this one is here. I don't know that that's Joseph, but this is Mary. Jesus with the halo, just a young boy looking at them and the older priestly scholars in the temple. And you know his expression of, well, didn't you know you could find me in my Father's house? I love that. And they take him back to next. Wedding feast at Cana. This is, I want you just to, in your head before I go further, just imagine where you think this takes place. Is it indoors? Is it outdoors? Is it a big event? Is it quiet? How many people are there? Who's there? Is it a dressy occasion, or do people come in off the street and from work? Just try to think about it for a minute. And this is where, of course, Mary commands Jesus to turn they're out of wine, do something. And he turns the water into wine. And this so prefigures the transfiguration. I don't quite understand that. You want to explain that? But I can't quite get that. Okay, we'll let you go. Well, you read that it does, but anyway, okay, just wanted to act like I knew something. So this is Giotto. We're back again. This is in the cycle in the Arena Chapel of Jesus's life. This would be the middle tier. And it's interesting, the planning of this. So this is Mary, haloed. This is the bride, servants, this person tasting the wine obviously enjoys food and wine. Here is Jesus, and here is the bridegroom. And I'm not sure who that is. Maybe Peter, because Joseph is no longer talked about. But here we are in a little tiny, I would say a tiny room, a fairly small room, massive jugs of wine. There were, I think, 6, and a very quiet scene. Now hang on to your chairs. Oh wait, I'm not there yet. Okay, one more in between. This is Flemish, and we talked about Flemish, Belgium, Northern Renaissance, how they take huge leap steps with perspective and proportion. So you see all kinds of little angels up here tooting their trumpets, and the Gothic. This is very similar to the Virgin of Paris. And here's Jesus giving a blessing. Miniature little boys here. Here's the bride, here's the groom. Don't know who he is, but he appears to be, he's holding some sort of saucer. I don't know the story. And this is Jesus and Mary. Now, Mary is becoming older at this point. You notice that she's changed, her look is changing, or the artist is changing her appearance. And she's more like a nun in this. She's wrapped, protected, not this beautiful young woman that most artists present. But this little scene is really a gem of Northern Renaissance art. Here we go. The spectacle of the wedding feast at Cana. So this is, Paolo Veronese was a late Renaissance artist in the Mannerist period. The Mannerism is late Renaissance. It's like Michelangelo's very last Pietà and the Last Judgment. Those would be Mannerism. Exaggerated poses, things out of context, lots of festival spectacle, flamboyance, distortion in the figures. El Greco would be an example of mannerism also. So this wedding feast at Cana, the only two people dressed in their contemporary biblical clothing are Christ and Mary right here. Everybody else is in 1560-ish dress of Venice. And this scene includes, you can see this exquisite classical architecture. And this scene includes, and it's for some reason cut off at the bottom, there's more down here. These four musicians are the four big artists in Venice at the time: Titian, Tintoretto, Veronese, and Bassani. And they're the musicians. Over here are really important guests. There's Suleiman, Ottoman Emperor. There is Eleanor of Austria. There's the King of France. There is Mary I of England, and just this entourage of important people that have been invited to the wedding feast at Cana. And this enormous painting. This is the largest painting in the Louvre, and I have to give you a little history on it. At the time of Napoleon, it was stolen. His soldiers ripped it horizontally and took it off the wall of San Giorgio Maggiore in Venice, which is a just exquisite church. And they rolled it up, took it back to Paris. And as you know, Napoleon opened his own museum after the war because he'd had all this booty at the Musée Napoléon. And that eventually, after his death and some years later, went to the Louvre, which was a palace at first and then became an art museum. And the painting was restored and hung in the Louvre. And in World War II, it was moved. It was taken off the wall, rolled up, sent to South France, moved around, and eventually came back to the Louvre and was restored. And in 2007, they did a computerized facsimile of it and put it back on the wall of San Giorgio, but it was never repatriated. So it has an interesting history.
Question, back to that painting. It looks like above the dome are those little angels.
They're birds.
Oh, they're birds.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you couldn't tell from
They're
here.
birds. Next week, we got a little bit of a late start, but we'll do that next week. So, if you didn't get a sheet on the actual biblical presences, Mary, pick it up.